The cold was a constant friend. It lived in the walls of the small apartment. It crept under the door and settled deep in the bones of James Braddock. His right hand ached the most. It was broken, a collection of small pains that reminded him of everything he had lost. He once used that hand to become one of the best boxers in the world. Now, he used it to hide the holes in his children's shoes, to count the few coins he had, to feel the empty space in the bread box. The cheers of the crowd were a distant memory, like a song from another life. He had been a good fighter, a real contender. People knew his name. He had money, a nice home, and a future that shined bright. But the world changed. A great sadness fell over the country, and jobs vanished like smoke. For a boxer, bad luck and injuries can be worse than any punch. His career fell apart. The bright lights of the boxing ring were replaced by the dim light of a home where food was scarce. He wasn't a contender anymore. He was just another man who had lost his way. His wife, May, saw the worry in his eyes. She never spoke of her own fears, but he could feel them in the quiet of their home. His children were too young to understand why their plates were often half empty. They only knew their father was there, his love a warm blanket against the cold. For James, this was the heaviest weight of all, not the punches from opponents, but the silent hunger of his own family. He would have done anything to change it. He was a father first, a fighter second. So he went to the docks. Every morning, before the sun came up, he would stand in a line with hundreds of other men, all hoping for a day's work. The work was hard, lifting heavy bags and crates, his body screaming in protest. His broken hand throbbed with every box he moved. But the pain was a small price to pay for the few dollars that meant milk for his children's cups and a little bit of meat for their dinner. This was his new fight, a slow, grinding battle against poverty, one day at a time. There were days he didn't get picked for work. On those days, the walk home was the longest journey in the world. The shame felt like a heavy coat he couldn't take off. He had to do something he swore he would never do. He went to the relief office, the place people went when they had nothing left. He took the government money, his head held low. It felt like the final bell, the end of the fight. He had given up. For his family, he had swallowed his pride, and it tasted like defeat. Then one day the phone rang. It was his old manager, Joe Gould. A boxer had dropped out of a fight at the last minute. They needed a replacement. The pay was small, just enough to help for a little while. Joe didn't think James could win. Nobody did. But he knew James needed the money. It wasn't a comeback. It was a single night's work. A chance to put a little more food on the table. For James Braddock, that was reason enough to say yes. His opponent was a young, strong fighter named Griffin. Griffin was on his way up, a rising star. Braddock was seen as an easy win, a name from the past brought in to lose. The crowd saw an old man, worn down by life. They didn't see the fire that still burned inside him. They didn't understand the strength he had found on the cold, hard docks. It was a different kind of strength, built not in a gym, but in the desperate struggle to survive. From the first bell, something was different. Braddock wasn't fighting for points or for glory. He was fighting for his children's next meal. Every punch he threw had the weight of his love and his desperation behind it. He took punches from Griffin that would have knocked down the old Braddock. But the man from the docks was harder, tougher. He absorbed the punishment and kept moving forward. In the third round, he landed a punch that shocked everyone. Griffin fell to the canvas and did not get up. The sound of the crowd was a roar he hadn't heard in years, but the sweetest sound was the jingle of the prize money in his pocket. It meant rent could be paid. It meant there would be heat in the apartment. It meant his family would eat well for a little while. This victory wasn't about a title or a trophy. It was about the simple, beautiful feeling of being able to provide for the people he loved. It was a feeling more precious than any championship belt. The first thing James did with his winnings was walk back to the relief office. The workers there were surprised to see him. He didn't come to ask for more. He came to pay back every penny he had been given. It was an act of pure pride, of a man reclaiming his dignity. News of this spread. In a time when so many people were struggling, this small act of honor meant something. People started talking about the boxer who paid his debts. Suddenly, more fights were offered, and James kept winning. He beat fighter after fighter, men who were younger, faster, and stronger on paper, but they couldn't match his will. The newspapers, searching for a good story in dark times, found one in James Braddock. They wrote about the washed-up boxer who came back from nothing. They gave him a nickname that stuck: the Cinderella Man. His story touched the hearts of people all across the country. Everyone felt like they had been knocked down by life. Everyone was struggling. In James Braddock, they saw a piece of themselves. They saw a man who refused to be beaten, who got back up no matter how many times he was hit. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for all the forgotten people, for everyone who dreamed of a second chance. His training was no longer a lonely chore. It was a mission. He ran through the dark city streets, and he felt the hopes of millions running with him. When his body ached and his lungs burned, he thought of the faces of the men on the docks, the tired eyes of families in breadlines. He was their champion. He carried their silent prayers into the gym with him every single day. This hope was a powerful thing, but it was also heavy. He was no longer just a man. He was a symbol, a living, breathing story of hope. The pressure was immense. Every fight was more than just a fight. It was a test of that hope. If he lost, it felt like everyone lost with him. The old gym was no longer a quiet, lonely place. Now, when James trained, people came to watch. Reporters stood in the corners, taking notes. Kids from the neighborhood would press their faces against the dusty windows, their eyes wide with wonder. Every punch he threw against the heavy bag echoed like a heartbeat for the city. It was a sound of hope in a world that had gone silent. The men in expensive suits, the ones who ran the world of boxing, started to worry. At first, they saw James as just a nice story for the papers, a flash of luck that would burn out. But he kept winning. He was messing up their plans. He wasn't supposed to be here, this forgotten man who refused to stay down. He became a problem they could no longer ignore. He had beaten every opponent they had given him. There was only one place left for him to go, the very top. So they decided to give the people their show. They would put their powerful champion in the ring with this Cinderella Man. They believed it would be the end of the fairy tale. He had to keep winning, not just for his family, but for a nation that was watching and believing in him. Then came the impossible offer, a chance to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world. The opponent was a man named Max Baer. Baer was everything Braddock was not. He was young, flashy, and incredibly powerful. He was the champion, a giant of the sport who seemed unbeatable. He was a force of nature in the ring, a handsome man with a smile on his face and thunder in his fists. Max Baer was more than just a champion. He was dangerous. His punches were so hard, they were like being hit by a speeding car. 2 men had died after fighting him. This was the man James Braddock was being asked to face. The risk was not just losing. The risk was not coming home at all. The thought terrified everyone who cared about James. May begged him not to take the fight. She had seen what Baer could do. She would rather be poor forever than lose her husband. She saw the man she loved, not the symbol the world saw. She saw a father whose children needed him. The conflict tore at James. How could he risk leaving his family with nothing, not even a father? But he knew he had to fight. This one fight, if he won, could change their lives forever. They would never be cold or hungry again. It was the ultimate gamble. He was betting his life for his family's future. He looked at his children, and he knew his answer. He would step into that ring against the most dangerous man in the world because it was the only way to truly protect them. The night of the fight, the entire country seemed to stop. People gathered around their radios, hanging on every word from the announcer. In dusty farmhouses and crowded city apartments, they listened. They weren't just listening to a boxing match, they were listening for a sign of hope. Every punch Braddock threw felt like a blow against their own hard times. The fight was a war. For 15 long rounds, the 2 men battled. Max Baer was stronger, his punches landing with sickening force. He hit Braddock again and again, expecting him to fall. But Braddock did not fall. He was tough in a way Baer couldn't understand. He was dock worker tough. He was father tough. He bent, but he did not break. He took the champion's best shots and kept coming forward. In the punishing storm of Baer's punches, James thought about the cold. He remembered the feeling of an empty stomach, the ache in his broken hand as he lifted another crate. He remembered the look on his wife's face when he had to tell her there was no money. Compared to that, Max Baer's fists were just pain. And pain, James Braddock knew how to handle. He had lived with it for years. The final bell rang, and both men were still standing. The arena was filled with a deafening noise and a tense silence all at once. Braddock was bruised and bleeding, but he had survived. He had gone the distance. The judges counted their scores. For a long moment, the world held its breath. The story was not yet finished. Then, the announcer's voice cut through the noise. The winner and new heavyweight champion of the world was James J. Braddock. A wave of joy erupted, a sound so loud it felt like it could lift the roof off the building. Across the country, people cheered in their homes, strangers hugged in the streets. Their fighter, the Cinderella Man, had done the impossible. His victory was more than just a boxing title. It was a story that gave a whole country a reason to believe again. It was a light in the darkness. It told people that no matter how far you fall, you can always get back up. It was a promise that courage and love and a refusal to quit could conquer anything, even the hardest of times. James Braddock, the champion, bought his family a house and lived a long, happy life. He never lost the quiet humility of the man who had known hardship. He was a hero to millions, but he never forgot the days when he was just a father, fighting for milk. He was proof that sometimes the greatest champions are not the ones who are born the strongest, but the ones who simply refuse to stay down.